All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Oversteer episode 118. We haven't done anything non-Greek speaking for a long, long time, actually more than a year. And last time we had someone over who was not Greek and we did not speak Greek, was actually after the whole 2021 finale. So it's really more than a year. So apart from me, Mar is here too. Say hi, Mar.
Hello, hello.
If you don't know us, if you don't know who we are, because you may listen to this podcast for the first time because you're not Greek or Greek speaking, we are Greek journalists, Greek F1 journalists, and we cover F1 on currentdriver.gr and gpdynamics.org. And we actually have this podcast thingy for together for the past 10 months, almost 9 months. Oversteer has a almost 4 year history by now. And with us today, the reason why we speak in English is Mr. Edward Spencer. I said his whole name for some reason. Hi, Ed.
Hi, Dimitris.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. You?
I'm good. I'm very happy you're here, actually. We're very happy you're here. So, Ed, you're a colleague, you're a fellow F1 and in general, motorsport journalist, actually. So, where can we find you?
You can find me on Total Motorsports, Ed Spencer 99. I'm the feature writer for the site. It's a relatively newish site that I joined after I departed Motorlat. You can also find me, talking endless waffle on Twitter and Instagram. But you'll get those tweets from an FIA accredited journalist, so they do have a relative bit of meaning to them.
Well, I've been an FIA accredited journalist. Let me tell you, it's a flex. It's a flex.
It's like a business card.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it's a flex maybe to people who are really into that. So it's not like you can go around and say, "Hey, I'm an FIA accredited journalist" to a whole bunch of gym bros, for example. It's not going to work.
They won't care. They won't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, probably, unless they're gym bros who actually watch F1, which is me 10 years ago. No, me 10 years ago. But yeah, Yes, Ed, hold on. Actually, go on, sorry.
No, I was just laughing.
Perfect. We start this podcast about F1 with comedic references and laughs. Great. So, we're here to discuss about the first two rounds of the 2023 F1 season. Obviously, we have a lot of things to discuss on, and actually, we have a lot of teams to talk about. Not only Red Bull and their dominance, but we're going to touch upon Aston Martin, Ferrari, Mercedes, probably a bit of the midfield too, so stick around. Starting off, I want to ask our guest Ed, and then of course Mar, how would they describe this season so far? Is it what they expected, or is it a bit less? I'm not going to say a bit more than what you expected. I'm just going to say, do you think that it is what you thought it would be, or is it a bit more undermining, let's say?
I honestly thought it would be what we are, where it would be a little bit processional. I didn't expect the gap would be this big, but yeah, it's been pretty much as expected. Red Bull would come out of the gates flying and everyone else be playing catch up. The only big surprise we've had really is the amount of pace Aston Martin has shown and also the complete lack of pace shown by Ferrari and Mercedes.
Mar?
Well, yeah, I expected Red Bull to be at the top with a huge margin, as they've shown in practice as well. Like, we expected that. We expected to see that. They had a lot of speed carrying on from last season, so that was only natural. I wasn't that surprised by Aston Martin, to be honest, because we saw how good and stable and quick the car was during testing, even though we said that we shouldn't take testing data as it is. And yeah, it's pretty much what I expected it would be.
Well, I'm going to say that I thought that it would be a bit more competitive in terms of wins and, I don't know. I didn't expect Red Bull to be so dominant. Really, maybe Max would be good and would be very strong. And even if Red Bull was not that far ahead, he would be able to win races. But right now there is no competition for them, and even Aston Martin, which is actually second, not only in the standings but actually in the team. I don't know, the performance. They're second best to Red Bull. They're not that close, so they don't really have the capacity to challenge them right now, at least. But yeah, Aston Martin was for me a bit of a surprise too, even though I had heard a lot of chatter about them over the winter and their progress on AMR 23. So maybe it shouldn't be a surprise, but of course you have to say it on track. So yeah, Ed, we rate races here. We are actually that bold. So since you're not a regular, and since you come and join us, you have to abide to the rules. Please rate the first 2 races of the season out of 10.
Okay, this isn't going to be very promising. Bahrain was a solid 5. If you look past the Alonso heroics and the fact that there was some decent dicing in the midfield, it was a fairly mediocre opening race. Jeddah, I'd say a big fat 3. It was very, very, very dull. Obviously it had the added little bit of element of wondering whether Max could go from 15th on the grid to first. Obviously he didn't. But it was a fairly mundane race. Everyone knew that Red Bull were going to dominate. And at the end, we had, decisions being made after the race within 3 to 5 business days, which is the normal in Formula One.
Yeah, it's always amazing to wait until possibly 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. here in Greece, or 10, 11 p.m. in the UK for a verdict. That's always nice to wait for the race classification 3 hours after the fact. Yeah, always fun for us too. So, okay, now we're gonna get to the juicy stuff. Red Bull. Are they cheating? No, okay. I'm gonna do that to the podcast. We're gonna get cancelled, or I don't know, praised by other fans.
Other fans.
Other fans, yes.
And generally.
Well, if you scroll through twitter.com, you'll see that Red Bull and cheating go hand in hand for the past, 6 months almost. Of course, I don't believe it, but I want to ask that. I have my own opinion on the matter, but I want to ask both Ed and Mar, of course. Do you believe that Red Bull has gained anything out of the budget cap rates?
Well, they certainly remain as quick as what they were last year, but I think it was fairly expected they would be fast, bearing in mind that this year's cars are an evolution of last year's, and we saw how good the RB18 was. It wasn't unexpected that the RB19 would turn into a bit of a rocket ship. Plus, the Honda engine is exceptional, and they've got 2 very good drivers at the top of their game. So it wasn't. I think the idea that this budget cap penalty would suddenly make Red Bull fight with the Hasses was rather churlish and quite misguided. Have they gained anything? No, I don't think they've gained anything. I think they've just probably remained at the same tempo as they were near the end of 2022. I think you'll probably see the penalty come into effect maybe end of 2023 when the championships will be decided anyway, or maybe even 2024. I think if people were expecting Red Bull to suddenly be at the back because of the penalty, I think unfortunately they must have been producing some magic beans in their garden.
Mark?
Yeah, they definitely didn't lose anything, but I highly doubt they gained anything. I agree with Ed. They should be at the same level as they were at the end of 2022.
Well, I'll chip in and say that my opinion is that the budget cap has nothing to do with their performance. Not even last year's car, last year's performance. Like they didn't even gain anything out of 2022 either, because the breeds was, first of all, minimal, and second, it was for the 2021 season. So any kind of work they would do on the 2022 car, it would be substantial the previous year, but during 2022, they really improved their car. They lost a lot of weight out of it, like they were 20 kilos overweight in Bahrain, and they were completely on the limit by June or July. So they did do a lot of stuff during the season that they won the championship. They got the double, actually, both the constructors' title and the drivers' one. So I don't think that there is anything to gain from that. But another question I have for you, and I'm going to continue with this theme of asking Ed first and then Mar, is does Red Bull have the capacity to continue being so dominant in terms of the competition? Because right now, both in Bahrain and in Jeddah, they were miles ahead. They were so far ahead, they didn't have even the slightest challenge. They could pull out a gap, not only from Ferrari and Mercedes, but also from Aston Martin, who, which really tries, and Fernando Alonso really tries to push, but they can't do much. Can Red Bull sustain that level of performance, or do we think that naturally it will come to a bit more of a competitive order in terms of, okay, Aston Martin maybe finds a couple of tenths or something like that?
I think Red Bull have pretty much got this championship locked up. I don't think, I just don't see anyone really giving them much of a fight this year. Every other top team, bar Aston Martin, seems to be in a bit of disarray. So, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if they win every race this year, which I don't believe has ever been done in Formula One, but either of you can correct me on this. And let's be honest, we haven't even got to the point where they're putting upgrades on the car. It could be even quicker when they put them on. I mean, who knows? We may be in a situation where Red Bull may be maybe 1.5 seconds clear of Aston Martin, which would be an interesting sight for the sport, which claims to be ultra competitive.
Mark?
Right. So I think that even if Aston Martin or Ferrari or even Mercedes get something really good happening for them, like during the season, as we approach to the later stages of the season, I doubt they'll be able to catch up with Red Bull. Even if Red Bull stays at the level they're at right now, I really doubt anyone can have anything against them.
Well, Mike Crack, and I have to do this little pause because in English it means something, in Greek it doesn't, but Mike Crack did say that fans should be patient and that good things are coming from Aston Martin, meaning that maybe they have a couple of upgrades or more that could transform their season.
Fair enough. They could win races. I really believe that Aston Martin have built a really good car, and they can actually do something with it and win races and podiums and everything. But I really doubt they can actually catch up and overtake Red Bull.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough ask. And actually, Ed, on what you said, the only season I can remember from memory that it could go like this, like one team getting every win in every race, is the 1988 season. But Senna crashed in Monza, Prost was not for the win, and Ferrari won. So it was 15 wins out of 16 races. Do I remember correctly?
Yeah, it was 15-16, but it wasn't Senna who caused the accident. It was more John Louis Schlesser.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
Who got in the way. Prost was nowhere. I think Prost retired during the race anyway.
Yeah, I had a mechanical issue. So yeah, that was the only. As you were talking and Mar was talking, I tried to remember from memory if any season was like that. Of course, something like 1956 could have gone that way, but I doubt. Okay, Max Verstappen or Sergio Perez? It is okay. I know that maybe it sounds a bit ridiculous even to say that. Like, can you compare a two-time world champion, one of the most prolific and talented drivers of his generation, or even from previous generations, he would be great, to a driver who was on the midfield a couple of seasons ago and has 5 wins in his tally. But I was amazed by Checo's ability to match Max's race pace and performance during the Jeddah Grand Prix. And could it be a scenario in which Perez sees his opportunity that, okay, we have no opponent, we're literally him and I, no one else, can I win it? Is it, do you think, Ed and Mar, is there any possibility actually for Checo to challenge Max on the long run and cause a Hamilton versus Rosberg kind of scenario in Red Bull?
Before we go to that, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. And I'm going to go back to the thing we were talking about earlier about most wins in season percentage by a team. And no team has ever done this. The closest a team has ever gotten to it is Mercedes in 2016. They won 19 out of 21 races with a percentage of 90.5%. And then it's Red Bull, and then it's Red Bull in 2022, 17 out of 22. And that's 77.3%.
Ed?
Yeah. Are you asking me about
Perez? Yeah. We're going back to.
Okay, I'll go back to this. Yeah, I definitely think there's a chance Checo can win it because Checo does have a lot of pace under him. And I think he has been more than a match for Max at times, albeit, he is not quite, on Max. He's not going to be as dominant as Max will ever be, but he's still a very good driver and he will undoubtedly give it a good run because, I think he will also look at this as his last chance to become world champion, bearing in mind the penalty hasn't really come into play yet. And he may never get another dominant car like this one. So he's got to go. He's got to go for it. And he's got to give it his all. And I think he can, but he needs a bit of luck, as does every driver when they're fighting for the championship. So yeah, I definitely think Checo has a chance. I think he would be rather idiotic to doubt him. I think there's been too many people who have spent the good past week writing him off. I think you should never write Checo Perez off ever.
Mar?
I don't really like Checo.
Okay, so it's time for an international audience to learn that you are a Checo Perez hater. Good.
I don't hate Checo Perez. Let me clear that up. I just don't think his, compared to Max always, I don't think he's that special so he can win a championship against Max. Again, if he wasn't Max's teammate, he maybe could have done something because he is actually a good driver. But compared to Max, the gap is huge, I think. And I honestly, even like Red Bull, I doubt. Okay, so I think Red Bull will always optimize their car and their strategies and everything according to Max's quirks and racing habits and racing style and everything. So Max will always have, I'm going to say advantage, but I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying that he's obviously their first driver, so they'll always optimize everything around him. So that's tough luck for Perez, obviously, because he will never be able to actually prove that he can win a world championship.
Ship. That ship has sunk. That ship has sunk already. No. To whoever doesn't isn't a regular listener of our podcast, Mar has called Sergio Perez the Citroën Ami of F1.
Yeah,
because
and
he's great in street circuits.
Exactly. Yeah, he is great in street circuits. I mean, there's that's it really.
Yeah.
Not that he's slow.
Not that he's cute and
No.
city friendly.
His maximum speed isn't 45 kilometers per hour. That's not my point. But he's
How do you
great
know
in
that by heart?
Please.
The sassiness, why?
Please.
Okay. Go on.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, that's it. I thought you would expand on the Citroën Ami.
No, he's just really great in city circuits. That's about it.
And blue, apparently.
And blue, apparently, yeah. But Citroën Ami has more colors, to be honest. So not very fair.
Well, I've only seen it in that CL kind of color. Anyway, I don't know why I know CL. Is it CL in
color.
English?
It's light blue, turquoise blue,
Turquoise blue. Okay.
sky
right.
blue.
Sky. Okay. Ed, save me from this, please.
You're on your own.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Okay. I'll chip in on the Perez Verstappen discussion and say that I really wish that this would happen. Like I really, if we're in a scenario in which Red Bull are unbeatable and they're only themselves and nothing else can stop them, the only scenario in which decision is even a little interesting is if Checo just decides to Rosberg that. Like if he does a Rosberg and he's for some reason amazing and he challenges Max and stuff like that. Yeah, sure. That's the only way we're gonna have an interesting championship. But I think that not only Red Bull and their technical department and how they decide to set up the car, is against Checo or for Max, because Max is the big dog in there and he's the one who is faster and he's the one who dictates what happens in terms of this side of things, the technical side of things. But also, I think Perez has this huge issue with longevity and consistency. He could be a great driver for 3 races straight. He could get even a win and challenge Max for another one or get a pole position even. But after these 3 or 4 races end, he'll drop back and he'll be way out of shape in terms of how we compare him to Verstappen. So even if this year doesn't show too much, because the worst position that Checo can get is, I don't know, 3rd or 2nd and not 5th. I think it will be an issue for him this year as well. And yeah, I don't know. But I wish this would happen, not because I don't want Max to win a championship or whatever, but if we're gonna have one team dominating everything, the only scenario in which we're gonna be even a little bit interested in what's happening on the TV is if Checo decides to Nico Rosberg that shit and just, do us a favor, really. Okay. To close the Red Bull chapter, where I really want to touch upon something that not a lot of people discuss, and it's the fact that they're gonna have even less time in aero testing, both CFD units and wind tunnel time. Not only because they have the penalty, but because on July the 1st, the time they have on these 2 tools will reset, and it will be even less than it is right now because they're still first. can we rely on that, on this halting their performance, or is it just wishful thinking?
I think it's daft thinking, if you ask me. No, I think, of course, the penalty will affect them more than, them losing more time through finishing first. I think at the moment that, as I say, the package is too strong to be beaten. You see, the Honda engine is, as I've said, is a very good one. I mean, that's been a key element to Red Bull's success. And plus, the whole idea of, they're going to be affected by wind tunnels. Adrian Newey hates wind tunnels. The man would happily go without them. So, no, it won't affect Red Bull too much.
Mar?
Yeah, I agree. I doubt it'll affect them. Maybe for next year, but I really doubt it'll affect them for this year's trajectory. I think they're on another level and nothing can stop them.
And it's fair for Ed to mention that it's fair from Ed to mention that Honda has a huge part in all that, because sure, they're not completely in F1 anymore. They have the technical support to the Red Bull powertrains department, but the work they did during the 2020 and 2021 seasons, the last two, they were fully committed to the sport. It's immense. No one can beat them on a straight line. Ferrari tried, but their engine breaks, and no engine is good if it breaks, no matter how powerful it is on the dyno or whatever, or theoretically. If you can't use it to the max, it's of no use. Mercedes can't cope with them either, even though they're not far behind. And Renault, of course, they lag in high speed. Sometimes they don't really have quite a good car in terms of balance to do that on the regular. When we go to Canada or Monza, sure, they're really quick, but they can't do that in every track. Red Bull and Honda can. And that's very, very, very important. Even though the new regulations that were implemented last year have the huge element of ground effect and the Venturi tunnels and how we exploit the Bernoulli effect, it really comes down to engine sometimes. If you can't defend on a straight line, no matter how fast you are on a corner, sometimes you really need to combine those two elements, and Red Bull does that exquisitely. And yeah, I agree. Adrian Newey could do without any kind of machinery to calculate his models. And actually, it's really important to mention something that is not really touched upon. Red Bull has the most ancient wind tunnel out of any team. Their tunnel was used from the RAF. Is that corrected? Your
RAF. Yeah.
The Royal Air Force of Britain, to test fighter jets in the 1950s. So you can't say this is the latest of the latest wind tunnels out there. They sure have done a lot of upgrades to it, but it's 70 years old. Like, come on, that's and they dominate. They have dominated F1 with that wind tunnel twice over, like both with Sebastian Vettel and now with Max Verstappen. So that's really props to Adrian Newey and his whole technical team that they can actually do that. So, should we move on to Aston Martin and this youngster, this very promising talent, Fernando Alonso? What do you say?
Well, I mean, this promising young Spanish guy, Fernando Alonso, he seems to have picked the right team at last, because when everyone heard, when everyone heard that he was going to Aston Martin, I think there was a collective eyebrow raising of what? You're going to Aston Martin? But it seems like the package has come together. I remember speaking with him in the media session on the day of the launch, and he was so confident. He was oozing confidence about this car, saying, I trust this team, I trust them to do well. Nothing will better winning for me. And the Aston Martin package is superb. It's come out of the gate really well. Alonso can fight. We saw briefly that, it can lead. And yeah, it seems the signings of Dan Fallows and Eric Baudin have paid off massively for the team, because now they are fighting for second in the Constructors' Championship. And it seems Lawrence Stroll is finally getting some good money back on his investment. It always seems quite funny, though. Alonso was ripping into his old teams before the launch, saying, if a team finished fourth, it was great. If a team finished fifth, it was great. If they finished seventh, it was a celebration. It seems like this team, although they're going to finish second in the Constructors' Championship, they're not going to be satisfied. And for a guy like Alonso, this is what he needs. He needs a team that are going to constantly strive for perfection. Because over his career, some of the teams he's driven for have been very complacent.
Mar?
I think that Aston Martin has built a great car. They have a great package, and they have the rightest driver that can ever use their car. And I think that's really something that we should be looking at, because I think it will affect the championship, and we will have Aston Martin wins. We will have Alonso wins. I don't know if we're gonna have Stroll wins. That maybe in under special conditions where everybody retires. I don't know. We'll see. But I think they're in a really good shape, and honestly, just good for them. And good for Alonso for finally making a good choice, as Ed said.
Yeah, well, he's been full of good choices outside of one. He joined Toyota, obviously the best team there is in World Endurance Championship. At least when he joined, they were just fighting on their own. He won Le Mans, he won a championship. Then he went on to win Daytona, the 24 Hours of Daytona. So he knows how to win. The important thing with Fernando is that he hasn't forgotten how to fight and how to win, how to fight for wins and how to be in the mix and fight with the best drivers out there, because he has proven that with both Hamilton and Verstappen, which are the top dogs right now. With Charles, we haven't seen him fight so much, but he is, even though he's in he's approaching his 42nd birthday on July, he doesn't really aids in terms of his abilities and what he does behind the wheel. Can we say that Aston Martin is the embodiment of the spirit of the regulations that have been imposed in terms of the time in wind tunnel and the CFD units? Can we say that this piece of regulation implemented for the first time in 2021 does really work? Because look, Aston Martin had more time and they did good use of it, Ed.
I would say so. I think the whole spirit of the new regulations was to make sure that teams like Aston Martin could fight for podiums and eventually race wins, and they've done a very good job of it. But are they any close to the Red Bull? No. So it's a 50-50 answer. Yes, it has worked because they're more competitive. No, because the pecking order still remains the same.
Mar?
Exactly. So nothing has really changed in terms of the actual championship order. I mean, as far as who's first, because Red Bull is still on the top, but Aston Martin did make a lot of progress, and they did jump a lot of places going up. So yeah, I think, I agree. It is 50-50.
Well, for one, I say it's not, in my mind, it's not 50-50. I really believe that it is only positives, because we have to take into account that this new piece of regulation was, I think, has found a lot of teams unprepared to make good use of it. For example, both Aston Martin and McLaren are in the middle of constructing a new wind tunnel. Especially for Aston Martin, it is a weird timing, maybe because they're actually now finishing up expanding their factory in Silverstone. Williams is in the process of buying software and improving their facilities as well. So teams have the regulation side of things covered, like they have more time with tools that they need to be more competitive, but they can't at the moment make good use of them because they don't have the means to do so. Which is pretty interesting to me. I think Ferrari was the first team to kind of show that, yeah, the scaling of how each team uses the wind tunnel and the CFD units can make a difference, because they jumped from 6th to 3rd to 2nd. But it's for me, Aston Martin shows it in a bit of a more radical way, because they started as in the 9th best team in 2022. They became the 6th best team, and now they're 2nd. But yeah, I only see. I didn't expect a complete rearrangement of the grid order, but what I see is very promising, and I hope that when we see teams using the surplus of money they have right now, the revenue is huge and their profits are huger, to actually use it and improve their facilities and hire more people to use what the FIA and Formula One has, quote unquote, given to them, because they all decided on it. But the regulations that are in place are favoring them, and they should, and they will, I believe, use them to their advantage. So, about Aston Martin, it is a good argument to say that if Aston Martin did it, there must be an inspiration, and their inspiration is visibly Red Bull. Is this something that should worry us in terms of maybe, hey, we see that only the Red Bull concept works, so all teams go down the Red Bull road? Or can we say that, okay, maybe the Red Bull road works, but each team will implement it in a different way? Ed?
I don't think they're just going to copy and paste with what Red Bull have done. Obviously, the Red Bull concept does work. And there has been comments in the past saying that the Aston Martin is a green Red Bull. But if you look at them side by side, they're completely different. I think it's good to look at different concepts, particularly from the Red Bull, i.e. the side pods, which have worked, unlike Mercedes' no pods, which have failed visibly, and maybe try and draw inspiration and then find, innovative ways around it. Because the good thing about Formula One is there are so many talented engineers who can make an already great concept into a world beater. So I think teams will always look at what the others are doing and then try and improve it. But I don't think we'll get to the stage where it's like a spec series.
Mm-hmm. Mark?
I think that's the best thing we can see. It's really interesting to see how one concept can be implemented in different ways, because that's what Aston Martin is doing, with taking inspiration from Red Bull and applying it in the way that they think that suits them, and clearly does suit them. It suits Alonso, it suits Stroll, and I really doubt that we'll see copies of the same car, like actual copies, exact copies. That I don't think that's possible.
Well, exact copies are not possible Not only because it is very difficult to do that, but because regulations are in place after the pink Mercedes, that again, the same team under different name, built.
It's a bit
Racing
illegal.
Point. It's a tiny bit illegal, yes. And I don't think a lot of people have it clear in their mind what you can and can't use from other teams. So after this rule was implemented at the end of the 2020 season and went into effect in 2021, you can still use the gearbox, the engine, obviously, and the rear suspension of a car, of an opponent of yours, even the same as they use during the same season, like the exact same part. But you still have to build a car that works around that kind of specification. And the rear suspension that Aston Martin uses right now is the same as the Mercedes W14 uses. And you see where one car is and where the other one is. So you can see that even if you have even the same element in your car, you could have a huge difference to the one you actually buy this part from. Mercedes sells this part to Aston Martin. Mercedes lends their wind tunnel to Aston Martin to do their runs in there because their wind tunnel is not ready until I think mid 2025 or mid 2024. I'm not sure. So, it's very interesting to see. Do we believe Dan Fallows and the Red Bull recruits, which were quite a lot of them, actually helped turn around the ship? And can we credit even a little bit Seb Vettel for this, Ed?
I think Fallows' influence on this year's car came a little bit later than what he would have hoped because he was put on gardening leave pretty early. But I think his influence has paid off as a Duan's influence. So, yeah, you could say so. And Seb put in the development work on the previous car. And it seems his influence has also been there as well. So, yeah, a little bit, but not mass loads.
Right. I feel like Dan Fallows has majorly affected the way Aston Martin has shaped their car and has definitely his efforts have definitely paid off. And as well as Seb, I think that, well, a 4 times world champion definitely has an effect on the car's progress. And I think he majorly helped Aston Martin build something good for this year by with everything that he gave them last year, data and his personal feeling and everything.
Yeah, obviously, a driver is very important in guiding actually giving the input to guide the engineers into a path and say, okay, we need to do this and this and this. And it's very interesting because Vettel's and Alonso's driving styles are completely different. They have no meeting point, but I guess that sometimes I think that works in general. And in my opinion, it would be very interesting to see Seb on this car, even for one race. I think he'd do amazingly. But that's the life of a B expert. He has to go back to his Bs. That's not a dig. It's okay. Seb did his run. Sebastian did what he could and had a great career. Now he has to give way for the younger generation. And I'm glad that he gives this chance to Fernando to show his talents. Okay.
To the younger generation.
Yeah, the younger generation.
Well, because obviously Fernando is the younger generation.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, please.
No.
No.
No,
No.
I absolutely love Fernando. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we know.
Well,
the Greek Greek audience knows.
Well, yeah, I started watching F1 with him.
With him? You
I
actually
mean-
met him?
Oh my god. I mean, actually following him and seeing
You
him.
stalker.
Oh my god.
You stalker.
Oh my god.
Shame on you, lady.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, all right. This you did was the most Greek thing in this podcast. All right, okay. Moving on from Aston Martin and their green exploits, Ferrari is in a bit of a, let's say, it's in a bit of a Ferrari moment, let's say, because they changed their team principle. Of course, changes like these do take time to manifest themselves. Fred Vasseur will not change the organization or the possibility, the prospects of this team overnight, but the ship does seem to turn, but it seems to turn either a bit slow or towards the wrong destination, because right now they're worse than they were last year. They lost a bit of time. Teams that were behind them have improved. Both Aston Martin and Mercedes look way better than Ferrari does right now. Maybe Mercedes not so much, but they are very competitive as well in terms of the possibilities that Scuderia has in terms of how their car behaves. Mercedes does seem like a threat. And there seems to be a bit of I don't know, disagreement towards Charles Leclerc and the team, and we saw that in Zed as well. So Ed, I want to start with you. Do you believe that Ferrari should write this season off, try to learn as much as they can, and move on to 2024, maybe with a new technical department or whatnot, because David Sanchez left them as well?
I would say maybe give it to Baku or give it to Imola before you decide to call it a day on this car. I think it'd be too judgmental right now to say, okay, we've got to move on to 2024, bearing in mind we've only had 2 races. You know, they're not going to win the championship this year, but there's still a good chance to get some wins and get some, good results on the board. So I wouldn't be too hasty. However, you have to be realistic. And if this year's car is just simply as it goes on, season goes on, and it is as the season goes on, and it continues to struggle, then you have to move on, because at the moment things are not stable at Maranello. Leclerc and Vigna are arguing. Vigna and Vasseur are at each other's heads. You've got people being moved around left, right, and centre. There's apparently a mole going around Maranello. It's not a happy team, and you need to get your house in order before you start winning races, and that's what Ferrari has to do. Fred Vasseur is a very capable team principal. He has not suddenly lost the knack of how to run a Formula One team. But unfortunately, the internal politics, which has seemingly dogged Ferrari since Enzo walked into the factory in the 40s, has come back to rear its ugly head, and it's going to probably be another storyline that we'll be focusing on during the year.
Mar?
Right. Ferrari always start their year saying, we're quicker than last year, we're better than last year, we have improved here, there, and there. And they always, at some point, they always run up to a problem. And that problem becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and they cannot solve it ever. And that has been going on for years, and they never really seem to do anything about it. And it's not always the same problem. It's always a different one. I'm not saying they always have the same problem and they can't solve it ever. I'm just saying they always have a particular problem, and it just grows and grows and grows inside the team, and it causes even more issues with the car, with the drivers, with the management, with everything. So I think Ferrari has got to, I don't know, solve their issues before they even try to figure out what's wrong with the car.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Vassar's appointment would absolutely bring quite a lot of changes inside the team, because it was based around Binotto's people and Binotto's decisions. So now they have to rearrange that and see how they go through this transition of, hey, this is a new boss now, has a new way of managing the team, and possibly his own people who trusts and wants to promote to senior positions. Simone Resta, for example, is on his way back to Maranello since David Sanchez left, and now, of course, we know he will join McLaren. But yeah, I agree with Mar on that one. I think they have to, at first, they have to solve the team's problems, like
The internal problems. Yeah.
yeah. I honestly think that they can't do that even in a year, because they are systemic issues. It's a problematic culture. When you think that the CEO of the company and the team principal of the team of the racing team argue over who is more bossy than the other one, and a guy from the microchip industry wants to have a say over a guy who literally eats, breathes, sleeps, and farts racing, as far as I'm concerned. It's astonishing. It's utterly astonishing. I believe in Fred Vassar's abilities, as Ed said, but you cannot work on a concept or on a project if you don't have full freedom and freedom of choice and freedom of movement. We'll see. Ferrari really does seem to have this issue.
And I just want to add that another issue that they will always have, and they will always struggle with, is who's the first driver and who's the second one. You absolutely cannot go further if you don't specify who's first and who's second. And Ferrari always runs up to that problem. They always seem to just, there's miscommunication regarding that. There's battles that shouldn't even exist. There's crashes, as we saw with Seb and Charles a few years ago. There's just, you cannot do that. If you want to fight for a championship, pick a driver for that job. Just like Red Bull has done, just like Mercedes have done. You cannot do this to yourself.
Well, Ed, do you want to chip in on that, because that's an interesting topic? Yeah. Do you think? Yeah,
I do think you have to have a number one driver, particularly a team as big as Ferrari's, and evidently the number one driver is Charles, because Charles has really carried that team over the past 3 or 4 years, maybe even, you could even say as early as 2019. So I think Ferrari do need to start, assigning drivers to one particular role. I think the problem is at the moment, the garage is still quite divided. It is still very much a divided camp, in that you have sciences people and you have the clerks people, and it's never really working in harmony. It's always seemingly two different garages. It's a bit like Lorenzo and Rossi when they were at Yamaha in MotoGP. They always had like a wall in the middle of the garage. It seems like, it wouldn't surprise me if Ferrari one day decided, okay, let's just stick a wall in the middle of the garage and, advertise some new crypto sponsor. It's never been. I think it is. They get on, but I think Charles knows that he is the better driver, and I think Carlos tries a little bit too hard to try and beat Charles. Some of the mistakes we saw last year were pretty much him trying to trying to regain lost ground from a bad qualifying or a difficult start. So I think Ferrari do need to start looking at that role, and they also need to let Vasseur do what he wants to do. Because, as I say, Vasseur is the man for the job. Is the right man for the job. Now, he can easily become the wrong man for the job if he's got an Agnelli spokesman, or he's got someone who has got barely any connection with the automotive industry, telling him in his ear, "Oh well, I would do this, I would do that." It's a bit like being told in your job. You're on a computer all day, you're typing away, and someone says, "Oh, I'd use this key instead," when in reality they can't even send the proper text.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it's an argument. I have for a long time that okay, teams do tend to be more corporate-like because F1 has boomed in popularity and the revenue is higher than ever, and the stakes are higher than ever. So you need a corporate structure. You can't go with garages.
After all, it is business.
Yeah, it is business, but you need to have motorsport racing people running the day-to-day stuff of these teams, the truck activities or the factory activities. Mercedes, for example, and Red Bull is very, I don't know, it has, I think they've struck the right balance with it, because sure, their team principals are CEO too, that like they have the role of the CEO, both Toto Wolff and Christian Horner, but they are racing people, they're motorsport people, they know racing. They're not just corporate heads in an office. They do have this kind of, I don't know, responsibility, if you want to say it like that, but they actually know how to run a racing team because they've done that for the better part of the last 3 decades. So it's very interesting to see how this is going to pan out. Obviously, Ferrari is always interesting to see because it is Ferrari. You can't argue with that. Whether you're a fan of it or not, it's an appealing brand and it's an appealing team, and a strong Ferrari package and even a championship run by a Ferrari driver is always an interesting sight. So we'll have an eye on that, and we'll see. We always have an eye of them anyway, even when they were 6th back in 2020. So I'd love to move on to the other team that has fallen out of grace. And of course, it's the perennial, as they used to be, world champions, but now they're back in 3rd, as it seems, Mercedes. I don't even want to discuss the side pod concept or whatever. I really have a question that both Fed and Mar, I want their opinion. Isn't it really weird, or I don't know, I didn't expect Toto Wolff to say that I don't care what concept we have or what side pods we use or whatever. I'd stick a Red Bull sticker on it anyway and call it a day if it was fast. I was surprised by that. The fact that they are so, I don't want to say desperate, but they want to become champions and winners again so much that they actually copy a design if it works. Ed?
I think it's very interesting to hear all these comments from Toto, and it seems like that no blame culture at Mercedes, which has been reviled for so long, has fully gone. When you hear him say, "Oh, I wouldn't care if we buy a Red Bull and paint it, Mercedes black and send it out, as long as it was fast, he didn't care," or saying, "Well, we're not going to get anything out of this car," or it was Lewis's decision to part ways with Angela Cullen and revealing it in a press conference. It seems very much like a team that is in crisis, and I don't like to use that word too much for a team that is currently in 3rd in the Constructors' Championship, because if you want a team in crisis, you just need to look at HRT in 2012, because that was a team in crisis. But you look at the way Mercedes have fallen, and you look at how they've got worse over the past 12 months, it's staggering. You have to wonder what has caused this downfall for a team which 2 or 3 years ago seemed unbeatable. And for me, it seems like there's a number of reasons, not just the side pod. The side pods were a factor, but they are getting most of the blame when a side pod doesn't change the entire complexity of a car. I think the engine has suffered a lot. If you look at the change from fuels, the Mercedes is now the 3rd best engine in Formula One. It just simply doesn't have the level speed that the Honda has, even though Aston Martin are pulling off tremendous things with a Mercedes engine in the back of their car. But if you look at McLaren and Williams, they've suffered as well. So I think, also you've got James Allison being moved in, moved out. You've got James Vowles going, which was a big loss for the team. It just seems a very unstable, camp. And they've got to really decide, what do we do this year? And it wouldn't surprise me if Mercedes do the first lot of upgrades and then say, well, we can't get anything from this car. We're not going to win the championship. We've got a very unhappy lead driver and an equally unhappy second driver. Let's decide to go on to the W15 and make it a world beater. Because that's the only way you can beat Red Bull in 2024. You make an absolutely exceptional car.
Yeah, they have to. Mar?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair enough. And honestly, Toto just sounds really tired and fed up, doesn't he? With saying that he doesn't care if it's a black Red Bull or whatever. And honestly, fair enough, because they went through a lot with, and I think that the whole thing starts in Abu Dhabi 2021. I think that this really affected the team, no matter how much they say that it didn't. I'm pretty sure that it did, at least psychologically. And not for now, but definitely for 2022, that affected them a lot. And the fact that they were struggling so much in 2022 definitely didn't help them in 2023. So they had a bad car and a bad mentality in 2022, and now they have a fed up mentality and a mediocre car in 2023. So they need to just wrap it all up, start from the beginning, and look onto 2024 so they can finally do something good again and actually be able to fight for wins, and not just for a P3 or an occasional P2 whenever things allow it.
Yeah, I agree with you on the on what you said about the mental part, the psychological part, and it's really interesting to see, and interesting maybe may not be the right word, but that's what I'm thinking of right now, to see that they, I don't know, published a letter towards their fans saying that we'll be back stronger and stuff like that. Like, okay, it's been 2 seasons that you haven't been on a championship run. Actually, one, you just lost the championship in 2021, and you actually did get the constructors one. So it's only 2022 and the start of 2023 that are not championship material cars. It's honestly, I think that they put the bar high, and they should. I mean, it's a factory team. It's a huge endeavor from Daimler, from Ineos, and from Toto Wolff, and more than 1,000 people work for them in both Brackley and Bridgeworth. So you do have a lot of ambition, but it's all this pressure. I think that it's just, it has a reverse effect on them. It eats them alive, if I can actually say it like that, express it like that. It's almost too much to cope. And to close out the Mercedes part of the discussion, I want to touch upon Lewis Hamilton. And do we believe that maybe he really considers leaving the team or leaving F1 altogether should the car not improve, or if he doesn't see any signs of improvement whatsoever, even for 2024, Ed?
I think the drive is still there. I think the commitment is still there from Lewis. I still believe that he wants to go for that 8th World Championship. And, on his day, he still has talent which made him what he is, what he is today. But I think he's looking at it. I think he's also assessing his options. Where can he realistically go if, let's say, he wants to lead Mercedes? He won't be going to Red Bull. there was never even a thought of that happening. I don't even know why it was suggested. The only other team you could probably go for is maybe Ferrari or Aston Martin at a push. So he has to look at what he wants to do next. I still feel that Lewis will do maybe 1, maybe 2 more seasons. But if 8 hasn't arrived by 2024, I think that's probably when we will see him depart. Because he's nearly 40, and I've never believed Lewis would do what Fernando's doing, which is racing till he's 41, 42 years old. I think because Lewis has already achieved so much already, he probably wants to move on to other projects, leave with his head held high, rather than being someone who's running around 7th, 8th. That's not how he would want to end his Formula One career. So, in that regard, I think this year will be an interesting one over summer. See what he does.
Mark?
I didn't think that he was going to leave in 2024, but finding out that he parted ways with Angela, that kind of concerned me, if I can say that. And I have a slight, I think that he might be leaving before 2024, at the end of 2023. But then that wouldn't make sense because he said that he wants to be in F1 next year. And honestly, I really, really think that he can go for that 8th if Mercedes give him a really good car. And then he's going to put all his talent in that he has, and he has proven that he has so many times. So I really don't know. I honestly don't know what he's going to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, in all seriousness, you cannot say that Lewis Hamilton is not a championship contender should the car actually is on this level of competitiveness. But he's such a, I don't know, he's one of these people that are not defined by one thing. If he doesn't race in F1, he can get into the music industry or the film industry, either as a producer or as an actor or whatever. He has so many interests and so many endeavors already. I think that he doesn't need F1 if he doesn't see that he can be competitive and on the top. And it's really, at some point, it starts to be, of course, a discussion of age, even if he's one of the most athletic drivers out there and he really pushes his body towards being even more fit every season, and he really does a great job at that. But he's Lewis Hamilton. He can retire with 7 titles and 103 wins if he doesn't get any more wins or whatever. He will go down as one of the legends of the sport anyway. But we'll just we'll see. And I don't really believe that he will go to another team too. I really doubt that he will move to Ferrari, for example. If he leaves Mercedes, it means he leaves F1 altogether. So, I want to top it off with some talk about the French boys, because it was Ed's proposal before we started recording, and I want to give the floor to him because I want to hear his opinion on Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon and the Alpine match, the French match there.
I don't think it's been the start of the season they were expecting. I think there was 2 levels of expectations from Alpine. There was one side in Otmar Safnauer who was saying, we're going to give Alonso a run for his money. And, Gasly was very confident about the new car, saying it was the best shakedown he had ever had. And then you had Ocon turn around and saying, well, I don't think we're going to win a race this year. And it seems that Ocon has proven to be fairly correct. Alpine have not gone that next level. They are only, I believe, the 4th team. So, 4th team to have scored, 5th team.
5th. Yeah.
fifth team to have scored points in both races, which isn't too bad in itself. But they are struggling for points. They're 8th, 9th at the moment, in terms of results, in the fact that Gasly got 9th in Bahrain, 8th for Ocon. So it doesn't seem like there's much progress there at Alpine. And it seems the hangover from last year and the whole Oscar gate, Fernando jilting them at the altar, has really affected the psyche of Alpine. And it also seems like it's affected Ocon as well, because now you see the momentum shifting away from him as the lead driver. It's now moving towards Gasly, I think, because I thought Gasly's performance in Bahrain was more impressive than what Ocon did in Jeddah. So I think, it's starting to go away from Esteban, in the sense of he may no longer be the head chief at Alpine.
Well, he surely isn't, because Pierre is very good. Like, Pierre Gasly is actually really, really talented, and we here predicted with Mar that it's going to be a close fight, and maybe even Pierre winning that fight, that battle inside the team, because he is immensely talented. And of course, his stint in Red Bull didn't show that he wasn't ready for that step yet, but in Toro Rosso and in AlphaTauri, of course, he was exceptional and a really good driver in the midfield. I think he can be this force to be reckoned with once again. Mar, any opinion on the French boys?
I think it's going to be a great internal battle, if we can say it like that. An inside battle between them. And I do think that Pierre is going to come on top. Not because Ocon isn't good. They're both on, I think they're both on maybe the same-ish level, with Gasly a bit. I think Gasly's is a bit of a better driver than Ocon, but they're both on the same level-ish. Yeah, I think they will struggle, but they will score points. They won't be last, obviously. We have McLaren for that.
Oh, God. Awesome.
But, yes. So, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see them battle between them, to be honest.
Yeah, obviously. All right. I think that's it. I think we covered what we wanted to cover. Ed, any last words before we close up the recording?
I don't think maybe McLaren we could touch on, because they've not had the best start to the season.
I personally think that that's what they deserve for being so out of touch with F1, really, because they made such a huge step in letting Andrea Seidel go and then replacing him with Andrea Stella, who, even though he knows the team and he's an experienced guy, I don't think he's a team principal kind of material. And now they have a whole last technical department restructured. Like, they go through James Key didn't work, let's bring in David Sansens and let's split Key's role into 3 parts, and 3 different people will be the head of technical department. I think they tried to do a lot of stuff combined. The only positive they have is Oscar Piastri. I think he has some talent to compensate with the lack of performance from the car, and I really want to see how he'll do against Lando Norris, who is exceptionally talented, and he can do a lot of things with a bad car.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I would say McLaren are, they made a mistake losing Seidel. I think Seidel did bring something to that team, and it was a general positive what he did at McLaren during his 3-year stint with them. And, Norris and Piastri are very good drivers, but the package is just not right. The car has never been great. They were openly very critical of what McLaren could do before the car had even left the garage. This was already at the launch, and they were already playing it down. I think they're going to have a tough season. I don't think they're going to be getting fifth in the construction. I don't even think they could get sixth this race. And I do wonder about Lando Norris. How much patience has he got left? Will he decide at the end of the year, okay, I've got to go, I've got to move to another team, maybe swallow my pride and become a second driver? Because as much as McLaren is loyal to you and you're loyal to McLaren, you can't waste your prime years of your career fighting for scraps and the points. That's just not what you want to do in Formula One. You want to fight for wins. With Piastri, he doesn't have as much pressure on him now. I think there's been some very unfair criticism of him. I don't think he is regretting his move because I don't think he would have been in a much better position at Alpine. And his performance in Jeddah was excellent. So I think there is definitely room to be happy, room for improvement, but there's also reasons to be cheerful on his side. But in general, I think it's going to be just one of those years for McLaren. But the buck shouldn't stop with Andrea Stella. I think it should stop with Zach Brown because he has been in charge of what hasn't been a great run for this team.
Yeah. Mar, any words for McLaren?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that it's such a shame that McLaren don't have a good package because that way we cannot really see any of that Piastri talent or any of that Lando talent, to be honest. And I'm saying Piastri first because we already know that Lando Norris is a very talented driver. So Piastri cannot really prove himself in that McLaren car. And that is really, really unfair to him because, well, you don't want a bad car on your first year in F1. That's not going to make things any easier for you. So yeah, I think it's going to be a difficult season for them.
It most definitely seems like that. And yeah, with that, I think we should thank you, Ed, for coming along.
Pleasure.
And what else? I think that you will find all the links that Ed will provide us with down below on the description of the episode. You'll also find both Mars and mine social media profiles and of course, Oversteer's social media profiles, halftone.fm for all your podcast needs. If you're Greek and you don't follow us, please do follow us on Spotify or any other platform you choose to listen to your podcast from. If you're not Greek, tough luck. We don't usually do non-Greek episodes, but, well, what do you know? You can always follow, and if you happen to see us doing something like that again, you can always listen to it. So, thank you very much. We'll talk through these wonderful microphones in Greek in 1 week's time after the Australian Grand Prix, which is run this weekend. And yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you for sticking by. Goodbye.